Welcome all to the September pensions webinar on preparing a benefits specification for a buy-in or buyout. I'm Helen Parrott and I'm joined this morning by my colleague Edward Jewitt. One point about housekeeping is if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A chat function. And we will get to them at the end of the webinar if we have time. So off we go. This slide sets out what we will cover today, which is the purpose of a benefits specification, practical steps for preparing one, and the trustee's role in preparing one. So let's start with the purpose of a benefits specification. Well, it's to set out the benefits that will be covered by the buy-in, buyout policy. Why is that important? Well, insurers will base their quotations on it, and trustees will remain liable for any benefits not covered in the specification. So arguably, it's the most important document in the transaction. It will also capture discretions and practices, such as any discretionary dependence pension or discretionary pension increases. These may be hard-coded in, so the insurer has certainty as to the payment obligations it's taking on. Edward will comment on this later. So there's no magic as to who should prepare it. It can be prepared by the scheme administrator or the scheme lawyer or the actuary. We would always recommend having it checked by the lawyer and the actuary. Why would we recommend this? It's basically because care needs to be taken to ensure that the correct rules are used to determine members' benefits. And if it's originally prepared by either the actuaries or the lawyers, then sort of the reverse is true. You need to have input from the scheme's admin team. As you'll know, the rules are the starting point for members' benefits, but sometimes in order to get a full picture of benefits, you need to understand current administrative practice. A good example is, say, where the rules are silent as to how certain benefits are to be paid. Well, you need to know how they're administered in practice. So how do you go about preparing a benefit specification? Well, you basically need to write down in an easy to understand way the benefits that the scheme provides. So the main challenge here is therefore to capture what I like to refer to as the scheme rules complexities. And the point here is that, well, broadly the position is that the rules that apply to members are the rules that were in force as at the date a member left service. So you need to check the rules in force at different times in a scheme's history. This can be quite complex. For example, where the scheme is 50 or more years old or has different sections with different benefit structures, it's not only complex, but also very time consuming. So on a practical level, preparation of a benefit specification is achieved by using, in essence, a precedent spreadsheet, which breaks down the benefits in a sensible order as between different categories of members. Examples are set out on this slide as between pensioners and deferred members. You can see obviously that a lot more information is needed in respect of deferred members because they're yet to receive their benefits. I'm now going to hand over to Edward, who's going to take you through the rest of the slides.
Thanks very much, Helen, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to look at some of the specific issues that come up when you prepare a benefit specification. The specification needs to work during the period before the insurer issues individual annuity policies to members. That's the buy-in period. And it also needs to work after the insurer issues individual insurance policies. That's buy-out. And a key difference is that the trustees stop being involved once you get to buy-out. For example, Who gets lump sum death benefits? During the buy-in period, that ought to be a decision for the trustees. And once you get to buy out, it needs to be a decision for the insurer. And the specification needs to make that clear. Could we go on to the next slide, please? A key role for the trustees is to approve the way in which discretions are dealt with in the specification. Many schemes say that members can only take early or late retirement or exchange pension for tax-free cash if the trustees agree. My view is that the specification shouldn't contain any requirements for members to have to get consent before they exercise these sorts of benefit option. And the reason for that is that I don't think that the insurers ought to have any veto over a member choosing to, say, take early or late retirement. And I don't think that that involves giving the trustees giving away any control. And the reason for that is that a benefit specification is an arrangement between the trustees and the insurance company. And so it doesn't override your scheme rules. And so if, say, there was a good reason for the trustees to withhold consent to a member taking early retirement, they'd still be able to do that under their rules during the buy-in period. Could we go on to the next slide, please? When you're working on a specification, you may get opportunities to simplify benefits in a way which improves things for the members, but doesn't cost any more, doesn't make the buy-in more expensive. For example, some older sets of rules say that a spouse's pension is only paid where the member and the spouse were married before the member left pensionable service. It may be possible to have that kind of restriction removed without any additional cost. If you make this sort of a simplification, you can turn it into a proper benefit, so part of your scheme, by using your augmentation power. And that would typically involve the employer having to consent and the actuary having to say no extra contributions are needed. But may we go to the next slide, please? Just in summary, I think that trustees can properly rely on their advisors to do the detailed heavy lifting when you prepare the benefit specification. But the trustees, in my view, should be involved to approve the treatment of discretionary benefits and any simplifications. Next slide, please. Now, one of the more challenging parts of a buy-in transaction is that insurers like to rewrite the benefit specification that you may have spent months preparing. They like to rewrite it in their own style. And this can slow down a transaction while you check whether they've reflected what you did right. So it's worth asking the insurers if they'll agree to use the benefit specification that you've prepared as part of the contract rather than doing this rewrite. And I'd recommend that you do that at the point that you are in an auction stage. In other words, you've got more than one insurer interested in your business. If you wait until you're in exclusive discussions with one insurer, then you've got less leverage. Next slide, please. I've called this one a commercial approach because it's about reducing the scope of the work that you do on the benefit specification with a view to saving costs. Helen explained earlier that members' benefits are usually set by the rules that were in force at the point that a member left pensionable service. And typically, schemes tended to improve their benefits during the 1980s and 1990s when they had a surplus. And then once you got into the 2000s, schemes started to reduce benefits as deficits grew. But if you think about it, if you had a member who left in the 1970s, say, you could probably say that we'll give that member the same benefits in the specification as a member who left in the 1990s, and the chances are that you won't be reducing what they get. This would be something to consider if you're trying to save costs. The risk is that unless you check someone's benefits properly, you end up insuring the wrong amounts. So I'd only recommend this approach if you would avoid, say, a disproportionate cost for a small group of members. Could we go to the next slide? Thanks. So when you get to the insurer issuing individual annuity policies to members buyout, I recommend that you check that the insurer has properly reflected the benefit specification that you've prepared in the individual annuity policies. And that isn't a given. And if we could just go to the final slide, please. So this is just about some basic things to do to plan ahead. The main thing that we would need as lawyers is a complete as set as possible of the trustee and rules of the scheme, and just a bit of time. That's really helpful. So that's all that we wanted to say. Thank you very much for joining.